You're now watching the Braver Angels podcast. I'm your host, Bill Doherty. Today, I'm with David Blankenhorn and David Lapp, who along with me are co-founders of Braver Angels. And we're really thrilled to be talking about the origins, the creation, how Braver Angels got started 5 years ago from the time we're having this conversation. So we're going to be informal, we're going to tell some stories, and happy to have you all with us. All right, so gentlemen, how the heck did this thing get started? What was the original idea? What was floating around first? And then we'll talk about this important conversation you guys have. But what was in the air that you were thinking about?
The idea that was in the air was that more and more the country was being caught up in the grip of polarization and rancor. I think we had felt it coming all through. I mean, I know, we'd known each other before this, and I think we all, we all were feeling it. What does it really mean? How does it, because, before, as some of us, we'd been working together on an issue, like we would work together on an issue, but it's like any issue that you wanted to deal with got stymied by polarization. That was the feeling I had. So we knew there was something happening. We knew there was something we didn't like happen. That was my feeling. And
yeah, I think also, for me, it was living in South Lebanon, Ohio, in 2016, which was ended up going heavily for my county, Warren County, ended up going heavily for Donald Trump in 2016. And then talking with, friends like, David Blankenhorn in New York City, and just the sense of, the stuff that I'm talking with, friends and neighbors in South Lebanon, Ohio, and, it's just becoming like, and the stuff that people are talking about in New York City and the mainstream media, just a sense of, wow, there's a really big disconnect, between our worlds, and, thinking of each other increasingly as alien or foreign or maybe even enemy, that we can't have a relationship with. So just a sense of, wow, can we do anything about this? Like, is there anything that can be done?
Yeah, and for me, seeing families getting torn apart, particularly after the nomination of President Trump and the bitterness of that election, I began to hear for the first time. I remember it was a fellow therapist who said that she had told her Republican husband, she was blue, that she might divorce him if he voted for Trump. Oh my goodness, like, what is happening here? So at the big macro level, at the personal level, lots of stuff going on. So that's kind of a backdrop. And so you guys decided to have a conversation shortly after the 2016 election. So tell us.
Yeah, I remember. What I remember is it was, well, I stayed up the early morning of election day 2016, watching the results. And then, like many people, stunned that President Trump, Donald J. Trump, became president. And then is surprised, just surprised at the results. And then, processing it the next morning, feeling a sense of like, wow, so I know that a lot of people are really bitterly, are really upset by the election of Donald Trump. And some people are really hopeful about the election of Donald Trump. And a sense that, could be actually, and you remember, Hillary Clinton, when she in her first conceding remarks talked about, well, let's try to see how we could work together and so forth. And I remember just thinking, I wonder how we could, writing to you, David, like, how could we take this moment to say, well, how can we, what are the points of common ground that we have? Is there some ways that we could find to work together? Because I was talking to a friend of mine who had voted for Trump, and he was saying, I hope that President Trump can help to bring us together. and that we could, that we could have a greater sense of unity as a country. And so I just remember thinking about that and then writing to you, David, and noting that and saying that, my attitude, now is like, well, okay, so how could we do this as like my neighbor who voted for Trump and people, who voted for Clinton, well, what are the areas of common ground that we could find? And just noting that. And then I think you, because you had the idea, David, earlier in the fall, I think it was September, you had called me and said, hey, could we bring together, 10 people who are planning to vote for Clinton and 10 people
In the
planning to
fall,
vote for Trump?
David, I don't even remember that, really.
You
And
did.
what did you
I
say?
don't
Bad
know.
idea?
It's a great idea, but I don't have, I had a baby, born on August the 17th, and I said, wow,
Yeah.
I said, I don't have time to do that right now.
Oh, David, I remember the context of that. I was kind of driving around the country, walking up to people in supermarkets and, donut shops, asking them, could I talk with them about the election? And I would just record it on my little phone. And I remember I did that for like 3 weeks. And I was so, I was really blown away. And I was doing it in the Southeast part of the United States. And all those places were strongly pro-Trump. And I've just never heard the level of anger that I had heard. I would say hatred. Hatred is not too strong a word. Hatred for all politicians. Astonishing hatred for Hillary Clinton. It really just made my hair stand up on end. And so I thought, this is really something. I've never seen anything like it. And so
yes, and
that
you
might have been the
stopped by
context of calling you. Say
Yeah,
that.
well, you stopped by our house. You stopped by my house here in South Lebanon, Ohio.
Oh, right.
We had some tea in the living room, and then you said, "Hey, where's a good place for me to talk to some people?" We said, "Well, there's the White Castle."
You took me to the
out
White
there, and there's
Castle.
the
Yeah, I
diner.
went to the White Castle. Had a great conversations with people. All right, it's all coming back.
Yeah. So as part of that, soon after you got home from that trip, or some point, you said, "Hey, this is like, when the presidential campaign is in full gear. Hey, let's do a gathering." I said, "Sorry, David, it's a great idea, but I don't have time right now." And then you resurrected that idea. November the 14th, you called me. And so this is after our initial correspondence. And then you called me a little bit later and you said, "Hey, what about this idea? Let's bring together 10 people who just voted for Donald Trump, 10 people who just voted for Hillary Clinton, and let's do it like as soon as we can." And
right
said,
away.
Yes.
Yeah, right away.
I'm in. Great idea.
Go out there and find those people.
So we were game. So the week of November 14th, I started organizing for recruiting people for a December 9th through the 11th workshop. A mere 3.5 weeks away.
Well, what was the first thing you did to like try to find somebody? Didn't you call up some people on your street or something? What was the first thing you did?
Yeah. So the first thing we did, of course, was to have a space, where are we going to meet? So there's a South Lebanon community center here. It's an old elementary school building, and a church has turned into a thriving, beautiful community center. And they have
I remember. Yeah.
They use it as their sanctuary and community center. So I called up the pastor and I said, "Pastor Kevin, could we use this space, for the weekend?" He said, "Sure, absolutely." And then I went down the street knocked on the door of my neighbor, who is a proud Trump supporter and former mail carrier and knows a lot of people, knocks on a lot of doors, for candidates. And she was in and she said, "Well, you should talk to Linda Burke, who's on the Republican Central Committee here in Warren County." And so I Facebooked.
Well, what was the first thing you said? What did you tell him we wanted to do? What did you tell the mail guy? What did you tell him we were going to do?
Well, I said, we want to bring together 10 people who just voted for Donald Trump with 10 people who just voted for Hillary Clinton. And could we have a weekend where we could see if we could talk with each other to find areas of common ground and to better understand our differences?
Okay.
And that's the language that I used. I was looking at my messages that I was sending to
Right.
people. And so yeah, it was just, I mean, the same, a lot of the same language that I use today.
Right.
So we did that. Talked to Linda Burke. She was immediately in, and
I remember her well. Yeah.
I met her at Starbucks, and the thing is, I wasn't connected to. I'm a lifelong conservative, lifelong Republican, but I wasn't connected to Republican politics, and certainly not the Democratic politics in the area. So I just kind of knew people from church, people from my neighborhood, friends, and so so I started just talking to some neighbor, knocking on the doors of my neighbors, Facebook messaging people. But Linda Burke said she was in, which I thought was great because she's involved with the local county Republicans. And then it was great. So we had like 5 Trump supporters say that they're in. My neighbor across the street, who's a former union construction worker who had voted Democratic and now was voting for Republican, he said he's in. And but I didn't know any Democrats. So I was like, where are the Democrats going to come from?
Oh, right. I remember you told me that was a little glitch in the giddy up.
Yeah. So I just emailed the leader of the county Democrats, just sent an email. It was like right before Thanksgiving. So the workshop at this point is a mere, like 2.5 weeks away. We've got like 0 Democrats. And
her name was Beth somebody?
Yeah. So I emailed Beth.
Yeah.
And Beth said, well, she said, I'd be happy to meet with you, to explore, to talk more about it. So we met at a local coffee shop, and she said, well, I'm not sure that I'd be the right person for this, but I think I know some people who would be good for it. And she was very generous and connected us with like more than half of the Democrats who ended up coming. So just like that, wow, we had, almost half of the people coming for the gathering. But there was one further issue. There was one little slight hiccup here. We ended up having like almost like we had about 10 people, 10 Trump voters and 10 Clinton voters.
At a certain point, we had to ask ourselves what we were going to do. Yeah.
10 days before the workshop is planned.
Yeah.
What are we going to do?
How come you hadn't thought about that ahead of time, David? Well, I will just say this about that. I don't know, David, I don't know how you were thinking about it in terms of like larger, your relationship to the universe kind of thing. But I didn't have any plan whatsoever. I didn't have any.
You wanted me to moderate the whole weekend thing. You're like, you live in South Lebanon.
Right. All I wanted to do was put people in the same room and see what happened. And I had no thoughts beyond that. And I thought, well, since you knew the people, you should moderate it. And you said, well, I've never done anything like this before. I said, it's okay. It's not that hard. So that's where we were. And I don't really know exactly, David, my memory is fogging. Who said we should call Bill? Was that you just saying that?
Yeah, no, of course you said we should call Bill because in the work that we had done together, for years prior, whenever you were planning, David, well, you can say it better than I can, but my experience of it was whenever we were planning like a conference or something like that, you call up Bill and say, hey, Bill, here's the meeting.
What's the design? We had depended on Bill many times previously to sort of come up with the design, the meeting design. But was it your?
It was your idea.
It was your idea. Okay, but so then I do remember calling. We got on the phone. We get on the phone with Bill, and Bill's a pretty loosey-goosey guy. But in this particular incident, he was a little alarmed that the thing was coming up in about 5 minutes, and not a single thought had been given to what we were going to do. And there were like 20 people, which automatically violates Bill's rule of you shouldn't have more than 14 or 15 people. So 20 people are showing up. The country's on the verge of, the country, each half of the country hates the other half and thinks that the world, if you're against Trump, thinks that the world might come to an end any moment. because of this crazy criminal maniac that is now the president. And the other half of the country feels like, we got our guy. And so we're going to bring these people together in this kind of really emotionally intense moment for Americans right after the election. They've somehow you talked them into showing up, and we don't have a single plan as to what to do. So I remember Bill being alarmed and saying, this could be a problem, because if you bring people together in this kind of situation, it could be you could have a negative outcome. People could, it could be, this could actually violate the principle of do no harm. And I'm not sure if it was on the phone. Maybe you remember this, Bill. I'm not sure when you first volunteered. I'm not sure when you first volunteered to moderate the thing, but I remember telling you, David's a young guy, let him do this. He can do it. These are his people. He'll just figure it all out. And then I think it was you, David, who said, I don't think I really do this. I don't know. What is your memory of that, Bill?
Well, I was sitting right in the same place I am right now when you called. And I remember thinking, do they have any idea what they're getting into here? Okay. But that was my thought. My words were, well, that's brave, what you're doing. And then I just saw great potential, but great possibility for absolute meltdown.
Disaster.
Yeah. But it was, it was your guys' idea, and you weren't calling me saying, would you design?
Oh no. We just want a little input.
So,
just your input, Bill.
We just want a little input.
So I said, geez, if you guys might be interested in my, helping out with this in terms of design, and so I'd be open. Actually, the deep truth is I looked at my calendar really fast, hoping that I was not free. Oh no, I have a big family gathering coming up with my guys. Because I could give you the design. If it failed, it's on you then. But I was free. So I remember, it's like you're having this party, and you weren't exactly asking me to come and play a major role. So I didn't want to say I'll do it. So I said, if
correction, Bill, you hadn't even been invited to the party yet. Just asking you for input.
So I was doing this delicate dance. I was sort of like you were setting up a medical procedure that required surgical skills, and I happen to be a surgeon, but you weren't asking me, to do it. And
not asking you to scrub down, right?
Right. So I said, if you might be interested, feel free to get back to me. Okay, and then you did.
And then we did, and I have it in front of me here, from my email correspondence that I've saved. December the 1st, 2016. David and David, Bill is writing. We're preparing for a first conversation. Like after you said, Bill, if you want my help, I can help. He said, as you know, I'm an inveterate planner, so I thought it might help our conversation if I wrote up some desired outcomes based on what I've learned so far.
I don't remember.
And a draft of a meeting plan. And there was the first, and you drafted the first Red Blue workshop.
Yeah. So it was
it's in the memo?
It's in the memo. It's an attachment, yes.
So that was for my anxiety management. And so at that point, then it was a threesome here. And then it was a rush to design it. I remember calling in my main consultant about the design, CJ Peak, who I've learned a lot from, and we've done a lot of.
And let's just say for the listeners, this is like 12 or 13 hours, right? This is
13 hours over a weekend.
Right. This is Friday night, a good chunk of Saturday, and 3 hours on Sunday afternoon. Right. So this is not a small thing.
That's right. So the idea was to plan it, and we all had some conversations about this, and pulled it, and I consulted with my colleague CJ Peak on it. I have never, I have to tell you, I've never been more nervous about anything I ever designed and facilitated than that gathering. Ever.
Because you had to do it so quickly?
Because of the volatility of this.
Oh yeah.
I mean, because of what you're saying, the country,
Yeah.
where the country was,
Yeah.
how divided people were, the potential for meltdowns. This was it wasn't clear, would people have the same goal? So it was a nerve-wracking experience. But hey, the reason I signed on is that we got to do something, right? I mean, this was, nobody else had anything on the table. And I just like to underline here, when people ask me what was the strategic plan involved in the creation of Braver Angels, we're talking about it now. Not very strategic, not very planful at the beginning, just like got to do something.
And in my mind, it was just, let's just see what happened. And I remember thinking that we've just spent 2 years or year and a half or 2 years intensely referring to one another as bad. A trillion advertisements, a jillion dinner conversations. And it's all about a certain form of engagement, but not one single time of my knowledge was anybody actually talking to the other person. Anybody, starting with the candidates. It was all this one thing. And so I thought, well, at least this would be something different. At least you would get people who feel strongly on both sides actually in a conversation. And and because there was no other, I couldn't think of any other idea, but you're right, that there's no strategy. There was no conception that we were going to start an organization. There was no conception that if we did one, we would do more. There was in my mind, absolutely none of that.
Yeah. And speaking of the anger, I mean, I remember when I was knocking on doors, talking to people, inviting people to the first workshop, I remember one of my neighbors told me, said, well, I really don't think that I'd be a good participant in this because I think I would just get too angry listening to people who, voted for Clinton. And somebody who voted for Clinton told me the same thing. Well, I really don't think I'd be a good participant in this because I just don't think I could take it, what I hear from the Trump voters.
Yeah.
That said, the people who came had intense, they believed strongly in who they voted for, and they had definite views.
Also, another, I don't want to hit this point too strongly, but I do remember you bringing it up, David. You said this is a blue collar town, and so the people who come to this thing are not going to be people who probably have spent a lot of time going to conferences, going to things that have the word dialogue in them, going to
in America,
academic activities. These are people who for better or worse, probably for better, this was an entirely new kind of experience.
Yes, I mean, in America,
I don't know, maybe I'm overstating it, but
no, you're absolutely correct. I mean, in America, as you know, 2/3 of us have a high school education or something like that, not a 4-year college degree. About 1/3 of us have a 4-year college degree or more. And at that first weekend workshop, that's exactly 2/3 of the participants had a high school education or something like that.
Right.
A third had a college degree or more. Our job titles and job titles of the participants included child care worker, factory worker, gunsmith, postal carrier, psychologist, retired auto worker, RN, go on and on.
Yeah. And I do, David, I think this is to your credit. You didn't just say this is a blue collar town and you go fishing where the fish are. You had a definite point of view about the importance of making sure that we didn't just gravitate toward the conference going elite. And I think that was you were clear about that in your own mind. It was one of the few rules we actually had before Bill got involved to give us a structure. So I really respect that.
So let's talk a bit about the experience of the workshop, and we won't go through the 13-hour design and so on. Let me just set it up by saying that the goals were similar, really the same that David Lapp, that understanding, finding common ground if possible, understanding each other, understanding our differences, finding common ground, and that the structure, it was very structured, and it was designed to make it such that people could listen to each other and not just fight each other. And so, so what? So
Hey,
we
Bill,
arrived. Yeah.
before you go in there, where did you come up with the idea for these exercises?
Well, yeah. So thank you for that. I just pulled together everything I knew. Okay, so so I'm a marriage and family therapist. I knew some stuff about creating, environments, but I also done a lot of group work for years. Have been to a lot of sessions that other people did, and so I just pulled together every tool I had. That just okay. What do I have in my toolbox? And what have I experienced? What have I led? And then how to design something that took people through a process of where you create some safety at the beginning, but you also create some sense of like, we're here doing important things, and then you gradually build in the depth over time. And you maintain a structure, and you have ground rules, and you vigorously enforce the ground rules.
But Bill, like in the stereotypes exercise, had you led a stereotypes exercise before of that nature? Had you done that?
I had been in a group as a participant who had done the stereotypes exercise.
Okay. Okay.
We have the Q&A, the questions and answer exercise. I'd been in a group that had done that. I've been in and led many fishbowls over the years. So if you think about the various aspects of the workshop, some of them I had led, some of them I had participated in as a participant, and including where I saw those work and not work. Okay, so it was basically what are the tools that are available to me to create this sort of structure.
And how long did you like, what do you spent like half a day on this, or?
Yeah, a couple of hours, and then shared them with my friend CJ Peak, got some feedback from him, got feedback from you guys, but was still tuning it up until the day that we.
What's so amazing to me is that we've done thousands of these things now, and the fundamental structure of the thing has not changed.
Yeah. It's we had the luxury of course of 13 hours. We had to do some trimming.
Right.
But so you just have your goals and your desired outcomes and a process, and then just trust. So we created the container. The container had best practices from lots of groups and none of which I made up from scratch, but pulled together these things. And then for me, then I have to give it over to the group. I mean, people have to either sign up to really do this, or they're not going to, right? And we can't control that.
Right.
So let's talk about our experience of that first workshop, and we let's not take the time to go through every aspect of it, but I'll start us off by saying that when we arrived at the site, we had some food for folks, and they were very quiet, and they were sitting in very different groups. It was not everybody mingling over coffee and hors d'oeuvres or drinks and hors d'oeuvres. There was tension and separateness. I remember walking in the room going, oh, okay. How about you guys?
Yeah, I had that feeling too. And my memory that Amber, David's wife, was doing everything she could to, make everybody feel welcome, and she brought in the food and the whole thing. But there was a kind of quiet. There was a quietness to it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I knew a lot of the people, maybe about half of the people, and I just remember feeling like, oh, we're mostly a group of people who've never met each other, very different from each other in a lot of ways, and different socioeconomic backgrounds, certainly different in terms of who we voted for president. And whew, this is we don't know each other.
So I'm interested in hearing from each of you when you began to feel this could work. And I'll start off. After we did the goals and a few other housekeeping things, we asked people why they came. Why did you come? Gave everybody up to a minute to say why they came. And I'll never forget that. The theme I heard was, we're worried about our country, we're worried about our community. We can't run this community if we're fighting each other all the time. We have schools to take care of and roads to build, and we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it. I mean, that was one of the themes, and I thought, okay, these folks are here to do some serious work. So how about you guys? When did you begin to feel like this could work?
I remember, certainly I remember during that first evening, one person said, a Democrat, he said, I came to see if I can learn to talk to my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that spoke volumes. Person has strong views, but is looking to see if, how he can improve his relationship with his cousin. There's a lot to go with there. A lot of openness, a lot of suggests humility, curiosity, interest. I also remember somebody saying, I don't understand how anyone could vote for Clinton, and I don't understand how anyone could vote for Trump. So it's like a sense of bewilderment too. But I just remember there being curiosity, like, well, how's this going to go, and like, I wonder what people are thinking.
Yeah, how about you, David B?
I felt I knew that I had a strong feeling that the whole thing was going to work almost from the beginning of from the first, because I heard people, like you said, Bill, I heard people buy into the idea that not only were they willing to talk to each other, there was part of them that really wanted to. Mm-hmm. We wanted to, because the feelings were so ugly and rancorous, and there was a feeling that this is good. This is a good thing to actually be talking to these people whose decisions I find incomprehensible. So I just felt we got it, it felt like a little bit like lightning in a bottle, because all I had really wanted was to see whether people would do that a little bit. And I realized the first night they would. And yeah.
One of the, I talked about having planned this thing, but there are some aspects of this that just had to happen for some understanding of how we do these workshops to emerge. And David B, it was you who helped later on me to understand this. And that is that we were bringing people together with ground rules around process, but we were not telling them what they could say. We were not instructing them about how to speak well. And there was this moment when I was working with, I think, the Red Group around the stereotypes, and that we hadn't learned yet to appoint the person, somebody to report out from the stereotypes group.
I think you just asked the guy to stand up and say something.
What happened was I was being what I call pseudo-democratic, small d. They're like, well, why don't we divide it up? We got 5 stereotypes. Who would like to present one or the other? And so
I remember that guy. He let loose some really raw stuff.
Yeah, I really liked them. And he was doing the why we're not racists.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. And then proceeded to not to be, he wasn't negative or nasty, but proceeded to say something like, we believe everybody should have equal opportunity for a job and so on. But heck, if you come with your pants hanging down over your butt, no wonder people don't give you a job. Okay. And so we're not going there.
That was one of a number of things I remember him saying along those lines.
Yeah. And I was standing near him as he was presenting. And that was one of those moments that in retrospect was really important for what we're doing in Braver Angels, because I let him go. I did not, this was not a diversity training workshop. This was not a workshop where he came to develop skills in how to speak in the most sensitive way. Now, he was not, in my book, talking hate speech or anything like that, but he was coming from some stereotypes, okay, that he talked about and that he enacted. And
actually, to his credit, he admitted, he said, I'm from a white neighborhood. I mean, he did not intend to do any harm. And I remember David was sitting right by him, and you had told us, you'd said, well, the two Davids should feel free to, jump in whenever you want to. And I remember I watched David Lapp sitting right by that guy, and he just finished his talk. And I remember thinking at the time that was not common for workshops of this nature. The moderator would have been much more would have interrupted and saying, people in the room are likely to feel upset by this. Maybe you could rephrase, or whatever you do if you have a degree in workshopology to cut people off and tell them not to say these kind of things. And you let him go. And I remember the next one, Bill, when a guy said, wonderful guy, used the term colored people. And it was the same thing. You didn't interrupt him, but you remember during the break, 3 of the African-American members of the group went up to him and said in a perfectly kind way, this is not a term that we like, and why don't you not use that term anymore, which he took him up on, and it worked. And so, but it was a key thing, because if we had gone the other way and you had done the typical moderator thing, I don't think the organization could have taken, I don't think any of it would have worked. I mean, do you think that's an overstatement?
I think it's very possible. D. Lapp, why don't you get in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just remember a powerful moment, that followed that was, I mean, so the same gentleman, I remember on the third day, on the last day of the workshop, and we were going around saying, what are you taking away from this weekend? And I remember that same person saying something to the effect of, I came in here as a white person from a mostly white neighborhood, not understanding why people who had just voted for Hillary Clinton were so afraid that Donald Trump is now president. And he said, I still don't agree. I still don't think that their fears are I don't agree that they have to be afraid, but I understand that they are afraid and why they are afraid.
Yeah.
And he also said, he said, I think a lot of us came to this gathering and we kind of peeked up over our fences a little bit and saw that we're not as far from each other as we thought that we were. And then I also remember you, Bill, were sitting next to him at that ending, and you choked up, Bill, talking about what you were taking away from the weekend. And in this wonderful moment of levity, you started choking up, and then this gentleman kind of put his arm around you and said, now it's my turn to help you, or something like that.
Well, I remember, if I could interrupt, he was on my left for a lot of the workshop, and he would overtalk sometimes. He's a young man, not used to groups, but over the course of the weekend, he was getting how do you participate in a group? But what I would do sometimes, if he was going on too long, I put my arm around him. I would touch him, time to finish up. And so at the end, when I was choked up, he said, I think it's time for me to put my arm around Bill.
And it was like this beautiful moment. I was sitting next to one of the blues in the group, Democrat, and she made the comment as something like, she said, I love that guy. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. There was this kind of this building of affection for each other by the end of it. A similar thing happened, by the way. One of an African American member in the weekend, she's a blue, and one of the white conservatives, the white conservative, he's like, what's the deal with Black Lives Matter? And he really had questions about that. And so he had said something during the weekend that I think caused, I think he thought it was taken the wrong way, but I think he knew that the African-American member of the group kind of took it, might be hurt by that or perplexed by it or something. So he went up and they had a conversation with each other, after the workshop, and just saying, hey, here's what I meant by that, and what do you think of, can you tell me more about Black Lives Matter and why you think that's a good movement, and here's what I think. And they had a very respectful, cordial conversation with each other, that was happening like after a whole day of conversations. And it was things like that you saw happening, in a little bit of building of affection and interest and deeper curiosity in each other. That seemed to me like there's something to work with here.
So I remember ending this really on a high, like a survival high for one thing. Right? But also, on Saturday night, so we had Friday night, all day Saturday. And then, so David B., I mean, some of what you've done in your career, is help groups develop documents. And then you proposed on Saturday, when it was clear that there was some common ground being found, you proposed that the group develop a document for America. And we couldn't have anticipated that going in. It was a possibility, but we didn't know how people were going to engage. And they went, yes. And so that Saturday night, you worked on a draft of the document. And then I put in a call to my friend CJ Peak, who was, he was on call with his cell phone for the weekend, saying, what would be a good way? How do you help a group? We only had 3 hours on Sunday. How do you help a group agree on a document in 3 hours? And he came up with an idea about, what was sort of green light, yellow light, red light for different aspects of it, and that there would be another draft that would go out. And so, that was, so talk about that process, David, of putting together that statement to America, because now I'm beginning to think, whoa, this is something here. We got to tell the country about this, and you took the lead on it.
Well, I remember we left Bill, I think this came from you, was that we left the planning was intentionally more open toward the end, because you don't really know. You have to be in that moment toward the end to see what's possible for the ending. You can't predict in advance. So on Saturday, I just felt, just possessed by this idea of a document. And I remember I was just so happy when the group said, yeah, let's try this. And I remember Sunday morning, just getting up early and taking the notes, because we had all these notes from all the sessions we had. So there was a lot to work with. And I think there had been a little bit of discussion on Saturday about what some of the themes people wanted in the document. Mm-hmm. Some of it was going to depend on how much trust there was for me to be a authentic, wordsmith. So I remember feeling a lot of pressure about it, but also a tremendous sense of excitement. And I knew it was going to work. I mean, the idea that this wasn't going to work was not anything I even remotely entertained, because I had the feeling from the very beginning that the thing that most needed to happen was happening, and it started happening right away, which is that people felt a sense of gladness that communication was possible in these circumstances, and so the idea of memorializing it, I knew this would work.
And then you spent Saturday night working on it.
Yeah, Saturday night and Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
And then I've forgotten, I mean, you had a process for going through it, I think section by section.
Yeah,
conceptually, what are the conceptual things? And then what's the order? And we kind of had maybe you got that from CJ, or maybe you just made it up on the spot, but we did the thing. And then it was and then it was like, okay, we're not wordsmithing the final thing. There's going to be a follow-up draft. Everybody's going to have lots of input into this. Nothing gets completed until everybody is signed off on every word. So it let there wasn't some pressure, but the main thing is by then everybody wanted to do this.
Yeah.
There wasn't just a bunch of people saying, well, I'm the smartest one, or I'm better than you, I have a better idea than you. People were like, yeah, I'm working with other people to do a common thing.
Yes.
And the thing I was just so focused on about the statement is that, this, Bill, and this, David, the whole trick with a group like this is to move them from the process of just, I'm station identification, I'm me, I'm saying what I want to say, to I'm working with these other people to do a thing. And when you make that transition, you're good. They're going to do it. Unless you get in their way, they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And as I recall, it was points of common ground that we had been, hearing throughout the weekend, and that we were documenting and seeing if there was indeed agreement on these points of common ground.
I tried to use the words that had been used, and a couple of times people kind of called me out and said, well, we didn't really say that. Okay, take it out,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was really crucial that you were showing and we were showing complete openness. This
Right.
group has to own it here.
Right.
And so it was, that was an electrifying way to end with this product, and the sense that, okay, it's going to go out, people willing to look at it in a timely way, and we're going to put this out to the country.
And we did, we published it. Yeah.
And we did. So I'd like to do an audible right now, gentlemen, in terms of our plan for this call. I think that I'd like to suggest that we finish out this podcast on that anniversary. This is the anniversary of that opener, okay? And that we consider doing another podcast on what happened next, including the bus tour and other things. But this has felt rich, a rich meal, and it is the anniversary of this. And maybe we could do another podcast at the anniversary of the bus tour or something like that. But I'm wondering, I'm just looking for your feedback about not now saying, well, let's go 6 months later.
There's more to say about the next phase of this thing, when we actually had some inkling of a notion that this was more than a one-off.
Yeah. Does that sound okay, David Lapp?
Yeah, that makes sense. It was a packed weekend, and it was a rich weekend. It led to the development of who we are now. So there's just a lot there to unpack.
Yeah. So to be continued, because there's more to the story. I'll say that one of the things that I, in addition to celebrating what happened as the meeting designer and the lead moderator, I also knew that the design took all of my skills to manage. And there were some difficult moments there that needed to be managed. And that we could not replicate that weekend. I've done this stuff my whole career, and I sweat bullets a few times. And so it was not going to be scalable for the country. So there was going to have to be more work on it. It just less time.
You didn't want me to moderate that workshop, Bill? You didn't want me to moderate that workshop the next weekend, Bill?
And not to get into the next round, but I'll just say that I was adamantly against what Bill just said, and Bill remembers this. I thought, no, this is the pure thing. From now on, we're going to go around the country. We're going to do these 13-hour meetings that Bill, we're going to we've got the model. We're not going to mess with it. And I was pretty, I had a lot of reasons, and I remember Bill you had a lot of reasons back, and it was what the diplomats call a full and frank exchange. And you argued that the thing would never replicate if the moderators had to be these highly trained people who could handle very difficult situations. You had to have something that citizens, the people next door who are the deacon in the church or the head of the something or other, the local community group could moderate. And I would say turning point number one for me was we're not going to tell people how to talk. And the other turning point is we're going to try to do something that can be led by citizens, not highly trained experts. And those were two, I still don't think we had a plan at that point, really. But those were two ideas that I think they were really your ideas. And I think we owe a lot to those two fairly early decisions.
And so, David Lapp, and what were you? We'll talk about how we felt about the weekend in a minute as we close up. But what sort of ideas were you taking, that some kernels for the future?
Well, I remember one of the participants said, as we were, doing our checkouts for the weekend, he said something to the effect of, "What happened here? I'd like to be involved. I'd like to be involved in this happening in other communities as well." And it's like, yeah, that's so for me, I think that's where my mind went. And in terms of thinking about, okay, but also, well, what's the next step for this group that just met here? It seemed a shame to just kind of say, all right, well, let's, go our merry way home, and we might not ever see each other again.
What did people say the next step should be? I don't remember.
Well, the next step was we did the next couple months later, we started the first Braver Angels Alliance from that, and the second weekend workshop that happened.
That first group said, let's start an ongoing group.
Those people were involved in, we didn't say it that weekend, but the idea,
they were involved in setting up an ongoing group. Yeah.
And the idea was, somebody that was explicitly mentioned was, this should happen in other communities, and I'd like to be involved.
Yeah,
I remember that part. Wasn't that when the lady said, these are lessons we learned in Sunday school and in kindergarten, and our job now is to go out and just make those more normal in society? I mean,
yeah,
she said it in a better way, but I remember I was so moved by that, that there's a certain simplicity to this, despite the fact that the design is difficult and the challenges of organizing it or something. There's also a certain simplicity at the heart of it that people pick up on immediately. That's why the thing caught on, because it didn't require, this is a kind of a natural desire and need for people. You give an opportunity for this, they like it, and they want more of it. It doesn't have to, it's not much, it's a simple thing ultimately. So.
Well, so let's finish up this, and we'll do another podcast, at least one, about what happened next. But it's 5 years later, gentlemen, and we so how do you feel about what's happened? We went into this weekend thinking it was, got to try it. Who knows what'll happen? No big plan. 5 years later, how are you each feeling about that launch in terms of where we are now?
What about you, David?
I think there's, I feel a lot of gratitude to have been a part of something meaningful for me, and I think others, and for our country. I think I feel a little bit of surprise that, something so small, 21 of us, 21 people gathered in a little community center in the village of 5,000 in Southwest Ohio, that became something that, is a national movement. I think so. I guess looking back, I'm like, wow, that's kind of surprising. And, but also really glad that, you see the grassroots kind of focus of it there at that first gathering, and really glad that was the direction that we went with Braver Angels. Was, I mean, academic conferences are good and important, and that's important work to do, but it's also really, there's an important part for ordinary citizens in places like South Lebanon to be coming together and talking to each other as fellow citizens. And so I'm really glad that 5 years later, that we went that direction.
So I'll go next and let you finish up, David B. A surprise, when you said surprise, D. Lapp, that because if you had told me this would be so all that has happened, I would just been thunderstruck. And also, I feel like we followed something. We followed the intuition that both of you had, that this something needed to happen. That conversation, it was just an intuition. And then when we got there, what I learned, I think we all learned, is to follow these folks and their sense that something has to continue here. Something really must happen, and their sense of the importance of this, and that feels so much more trustworthy to me than a big plan. I'm an academic, and do our 5-year strategic plans and so on, right? And so there's something organic about this from the beginning. We'll talk more about the other organic features, but gratitude, inspired, surprised, and then I'll get a little emotional as I say this, kind of like at the end of the workshop. I've always been a patriot, love my country. And this, for me, has been a chance to help my country. So I help families, I help, there's lots of ways I feel like I lived a meaningful life. But this is about our country. And that's why people came there. They're worried about their country as well as their families. And so what a remarkable opportunity to do something for my country. David?
Well, like you, I have a real sense of amazement at what has happened. I never, ever would have imagined it. One of my favorite hymns, it has a line of the hymn that says, not I, but the wind that blows through me. And the image I have of starting the organization with you guys is of standing on a corner, and you're just standing there. You don't have a big plan. You're just like, maybe you're just like, I don't know, waiting for a bus or something. And you feel this wind, and there's just a wind. And and for some reason, maybe for some reasons that you'll never quite understand, you decide that you'll just like go in the direction the wind is blowing, this particular wind. You're just like, well, what if I just went with that for a minute, see what happens? That's how I feel like. That's how I feel like the organization got started. The wind that blows through, and you just like, well, let's just do that. So it was a good move to do that, but that's all it was. That's really all it was for me. And it's by far the most exciting thing I've ever done. And I think one reason is because we're not against anybody. Most of my career, I've had enemies. I've had like bad guys that I'm trying to defeat their ideas. And, I'm not ashamed of any of that work, but this feels better. And the chance to work with the two of you, felt there's been an intimacy among the three of us that is, I experience it as quite profound, and it's something that I deeply, deeply treasure. So the chance to have worked with you guys these past 5 years, and looking ahead to more time together, that's there, of course, now the circle has expanded. Lots and lots of people involved in this, just as involved as we are, but somehow the three of us feels like a certain bond that I'm really, really, I feel very privileged to be a part of. So.
Okay. Well, so to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our meanderings through the past and our feelings about the present. More to come, because there's more in the story of Braver Angels. And so, D. Lapp, I'll hand it over to you to take us out.
Yeah, we welcome your feedback. Send us an email, media@braverangels.org. What did you think about this conversation? We take compliments, comments, and questions. And we want to keep the conversation going. And if you believe in what we're doing at Braver Angels, you're not already a member, become a member. Go to braverangels.org and join us. Subscribe to the Braver Angels podcast on your podcast channel, and join this work of building a house united. So until next time, let's go out there and let's build a house united.